If you want to see my progress on my Pan That palette for the month of December, then stick around. All right, let's get this out of the way. If you like the content of this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the content on this channel in general, and you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? And if you are subscribed, many thanks. On with the show. We are talking Smashbox today. I am so glad I picked this palette. If you are thinking of doing a Pan That palette, I think that doing an all matte neutral palette is a great idea, because no matter what you're doing in a given day, you can use one or more of these shades as a base, as a way to deepen the outer V, as a liner. It has multiple uses, and because of that, I have been able to make significant progress on this palette, and I can't wait to show you. Surprisingly enough, as well, I have been using the heck out of this brush, especially the liner side has been really great to use, and I've been using this one a great deal when I'm doing a little bit more precision work, patting specific shadows here and there. I have used a lot of the shades in this palette, and I will link the previous update right here for your convenience. I have used more shadows than I thought I would. So here is the palette now. The obvious one is this shade right here. If you haven't heard yet, this one was a black that shattered because I dropped the palette twice, so it's gone. But this is the one that I was focusing on a great deal. And I also mentioned that I was focusing on two other ones, Grounded, and this one over here. I always forget the name of it, Tonal. So I was focusing on Grounded and Tonal, as well as this one, which was an obvious one because I'm trying to kill it off. Now, this buff, which is the one with the big hole in it, I ended up repressing, and the reason I ended up repressing was that it was really just on the edges. I was having to dig my brush in. It's a very fluffy brush, and I was having to dig it into the corners, and I realized that I was really messing up my brush. And messing up my brush because a shadow is inconvenient is not a good reason, especially when it's because there's little shadow left. Let me show you the brush so I can explain. So this is the brush I have been using the most in using this palette, and as you can see, it's quite big and fluffy. And when you use it in a pan, you can see that it's quite big compared to the size of the pan. And so I had about, where you see on this side here, that was pretty much how much shadow I had all around, and the pan in the middle was quite large. So I basically crumbled up all the shadow, used alcohol to help mix it up, and then repressed it as well as I could in the pan. The one thing that I will say is that anytime you repress a shadow, it is a lot less firm than what was in the palette to begin with. And so it kicks up quite a bit. So I was very careful to just dab my brush in so that I wasn't wasting a bunch of product, because I want to pan it. I don't want to waste it. I have made some pretty serious damage. If you saw that second picture after the repress, you can tell that I have definitely major panned this repress. Because the shadow is now so soft, I don't expect that I will need to repress, but if I choose the need to repress, I think that I would just stop using that shadow until I can repress it with something else that is similar, or a shade that I am trying to lighten up. So I'm going to try to use up as much as I can without messing up my brush, but I will not focus on finishing up this shade any more than makes sense at this point. So it will be a repress along with another shadow contender. I'm going to talk about the other shadows that I used in this palette. I used almost everything in one way, shape, or form, which is really cool. I didn't expect to use it that much. I have used vanilla a whole lot as my brow bone highlight and inner corner often. I used Grounded a lot as my crease color. I also used Suede a lot as a crease color. Black Plum and Sumatra and Blackberry, these two, as liners a lot. And I also used, when I decided that this palette was all I wanted to use, I used Spice quite a bit as well. But I have to say that almost all the colors, just based on my explanation here, oh, and I also used this one, Truffle. I also used Truffle a couple of times because I wanted a gray base as opposed to a warm base, so a cooler base. I used a lot. I even, shoot, looking at it again, I even used this one, which is Drizzle. I even used this one when I was doing a cool look with a little bit of a plum aspect to it. So yeah, I mean, you can see my enthusiasm. And the second large pan I also used. So is there anything I didn't use? That was a long way of going about it, wasn't it? There's nothing I didn't use this month. So all this rambling, that was a lot of rambling. All this rambling to say, here I thought that this was a palette that I was going to pan. It was going to be a pain. But to my delight, which I really didn't expect, I am finding that all of these shades are very easy to apply, very easy to blend, and very easy to use as a neutral, as in unobtrusive color addition to a look I am making with another palette that might be the main palette. And I've really enjoyed it because not every palette has a bunch of mattes like this. So this has turned into a very nice companion, default companion palette to a bunch of palettes that I have. And as you can see, I play with a lot of different shades. So if I go back and I take a look, because Buff, obviously we talked about a lot, it's got that big pan and very little product. Shades that I used the most were definitely, after Buff, were definitely Grounded and Vanilla. I mean, this trio is really what I used a lot, but I have to admit that any of the peachy or brown tones were used pretty regularly. But out of all of the shades, if I look very closely, Grounded is the one, and I don't know if it's going to show on camera, that has a significant dip. And it reminds me of the dip that I promised the first time I was updating on Buff, saying, no, really, there's a dip, there's a dip. And so because I'm seeing a pretty significant dip in Grounded, it gives me hope that this is the next one that I'm going to pan. So I am going to declare it right now. I'm going to go for panning Grounded as my focus, and then I'm going to try to pan this one, Tonal, as next, because when I ran out of Buff, Tonal is not that much deeper, and I can mix it with Vanilla to get the shade that I want. This one's not quite what I want right now, but this one definitely, and I can see how mixing these two would be good. And then when I'm down to quite a bit of this gone, that might be the shade that I mix again with Buff if I find that I need to mix a shade with Buff. The long and short of this is that I'm very enthusiastic about where I am at with this palette. I gave myself a 2-month head start before 2019 because I was overwhelmed with the idea of panning a palette. But now I'm not overwhelmed anymore. I'm actually very hopeful, and not only hopeful, I'm anticipating my progress over the coming months, and I feel pretty sure about my progress, at least for now, because I'm enthusiastic about the palette, and I think that that is something that I wasn't sure about at the very beginning of this project. So I couldn't be happier. It's going really well, and if anything, I feel like I'm getting kudos or giving myself kudos for something that is feeling, at least right now, relatively, reasonably effortless. It's not feeling like drudgery, and I really like that. So I hope you enjoyed my update on the Smashbox Matte Exposure palette and my plan for the next month, and I look forward to seeing you in the next update for this palette or in the next video. But for now, take care.